In this example, I've explained how to enable the soft keys on the form and allow the user to interact with these keys. If you want to add other controls to the form, you have to directly create the controls and add them to the form. Although these form creation procedures are generally done in the onInitializing function, the controls must be implemented in the heap memory. Removing a control requires extraordinary care. Since controls in a form are automatically deleted when the form is deleted, developers must not delete them. In addition, this is also applied to forms. Since a form is deleted when it is changed to another form in a frame, developers must not delete the form. If you want to remove a form or a control in another container in the middle of a program, you must not directly delete it, but use the remove control function of the container. And if you want to remove all the controls at the same time, you can use the remove all controls function. Developers are responsible for directly deleting controls that do not belong to a container, such as overlay panel or dialog. In this example, we create a list control and add the control to a form. We create a list control in the heap memory and set up the control by calling the construct and add event listener functions. After that, we add the list to the form using the add control function. In bada, event handling is implemented by the event listener. Every control has the add event listener and remove event listener functions. The listener functions are appropriately named according to the type of event. The lowest level event listeners that every control has are focus event listener, key event listener, touch event listener, and drag drop event listener. Additionally, each control has an event listener specialized to the control. For example, in the case of a button, a check button, or a tab control, you can get an event when the button is pressed or when the selection status has been changed using an action event listener called iActionEventListener. In the case of the slider control, you can get an event when the slider has been moved using the iAdjustmentEventListener. In the case of the color picker, you can get an event when the color has been changed using a listener called iColorChangeEventListener. Now, let's see how we can develop a program using a list and pop-up control. In bada, various types of lists are supported, such as list, custom list, expandable list, grouped list, icon list, and the slidable list and slidable grouped list that support on-demand loading. Each of these list types will be explained in detail. The common feature of these lists is that they show multiple items in a sequence, and if an item is selected, the onItemStateChanged function is called to notify the program of the selection. Now, let's see how we can actually use lists. When you create a list, you have to specify the list style and the item format. Then, add an item event listener so that if an item is touched, this event can be notified to the program. Then, add these items to the list. You can add items to a list by repeatedly calling the addItem function. In the basic list type, the list format is a 2x2 item array. Depending on whether images or text strings are to be added to the list, lists of various formats are prepared. The list styles available include the normal style, styles for radio actions, and styles with a check or on-off. These functions are the basic list functions. The construct function receives the rectangle which specifies the list size and its location on the screen, the list style, the format, and the width and height of a cell. the add item function adds cells to a list. Since each cell can contain up to 2 text strings and 2 images, you can use this function to add all the required text and bitmap images for each cell. Additionally, you assign the item ID. To get the number of items in the list, you can use the getItemCount function. In addition, when an item has the on-off style or mark style, you can use the getFirstCheckedItem, getNextCheckedItem, and getLastCheckedItem functions in order to identify the selected items. You can also check whether an item has been selected or not by using the isItemChecked function. If an item is touched or its selection status has changed, the onItemStateChanged function of the iItemEventListener listener class is called. The source control, index, item ID, and state are returned through the parameters. The source control parameter is the list. The index parameter will return the index of the changed item. The ID parameter will return the ID of the item, and the state parameter will return whether the item has been selected by the user or not. Now let's see how we can implement an actual list. First, we need an event listener. For this example, the form is specified as the event listener. Then we need to create and construct a list. This is generally performed in the onInitializing function of the form. After that, we need to add the created list to the form, add items to the list, add the event listener to the list, and implement the event listener. To use the form as an event listener, we've inherited the iItemEventListener class in the declaration of the form class. And we declare the onItemStateChanged function to get events. This example shows how to actually create a list and add items to it. Of course, you have to create a list in the heap memory. We specify the rectangle that defines the size and location, the line style, the list format, the heights of the rows, as well as the widths of the columns when constructing the list. After this, we add this list to the form and add items to the list. Finally, we add the form class as the event listener of the list. Lastly, we implement the onItemStateChanged function of the form class. In this function, if the item state is item_selected, an appropriate text string is output according to the index.